Hello, students, and welcome. Today, we're going to be exploring a really fascinating chapter from your textbook, Footprints Without Feet, by the famous author H.G. Wells. But before we start, let me ask you a question. Just imagine, what would you do if you could become invisible? Think about it for a moment. Would you use this power for good? Maybe help someone? Or would you do some mischief? It's an interesting thought, isn't it? We'll keep that idea in your mind as we go through our story today. You see, this story belongs to a special genre called science fiction. It's a type of story where writers like H.G. Wells take a scientific idea, like invisibility, and imagine all the amazing and sometimes scary things that could happen because of it. It asks the question, what if? Okay, so here is how we will cover our lesson today. First, we will look at the power of invisibility. Then, we will understand the scientist's journey down a lawless path. After that, we'll see what happens when he becomes the stranger in Iping. Then it's very important that we are unmasking the themes. And finally, I will help you with how to frame your answers for your exams. Right then, let's dive into our first section and really understand the amazing scientific discovery at the heart of this story. So the story opens with a very curious scene. Imagine two young boys playing on a street in London. Suddenly, they see something strange. Fresh, muddy footprints are appearing on the steps of a house, but there is no one there. One by one, the footprints appear, walking down the street. The boys are just amazed. Where are these footprints coming from? Well, the answer is our main character, a scientist named Griffin. He has made a brilliant discovery. After many, many experiments, he created some rare drugs which he swallowed. And what did they do? They made his entire body become as transparent as a sheet of glass. Now, this is important. He is still solid. You can touch him. But because light can pass straight through him, he is completely invisible. Now, having such a great power is one thing. But what you do with that power, that is the real test of a person's character. So let's look closely at the scientist, Griffin, and the choices he makes. The book tells us something very important about him right at the beginning. It says, brilliant scientist though he was, Griffin was rather a lawless person. This one line is the key to understanding everything. It means that even though he was very, very smart, he did not respect the law or other people. He was short-tempered and selfish. And this bad character of his leads to his problems. First, his landlord tries to throw him out. So what does Griffin do in revenge? He sets the landlord's house on fire. A terrible act. Now, to escape without being caught, he has to take off all his clothes to become invisible. Suddenly, he is a homeless wanderer with no clothes and no money in the freezing cold of a London winter. His great discovery has become a big problem. So, he makes another bad choice. He breaks into a big department store for food and warmth. Inside the store, he finds some temporary comfort. He eats, he finds warm clothes, and he sleeps. But he wakes up too late the next morning, and the store assistants see him. To escape, what must he do? He has to take off all his new clothes again and run out into the cold, invisible and naked once more. He is becoming quite desperate now. He needs a way to cover his invisibility so he can live like a normal person. So he goes to a theatrical shop, a place that sells things for plays. And what does he do? He attacks the shopkeeper and robs him. He steals bandages to wrap around his head, dark glasses, a false nose, and a big hat. He creates a disguise, a fake identity. With this stolen money and his strange new look, Griffin decides to leave the busy city of London. He travels to a small, quiet village called Iping. He hopes to find some peace and quiet there to continue his experiments. But his strange appearance and his secretive nature only create more problems. So in this village, we can see two different things. On one hand, you have his appearance. What do the village people see? They see a very odd-looking stranger, covered in bandages, who is always angry and just wants to be left alone. But what is the reality? The truth is that he is a desperate, invisible scientist trying to hide a huge secret. This big difference creates a lot of suspicion and fear among the villagers. Soon after his arrival, very strange things start happening in Iping. First, a clergyman and his wife hear noises in their study. Their money is stolen, but they see no one. Then, Mrs. Hall, the owner of the inn where Griffin is staying, sees the furniture in his room moving by itself. A chair flies through the air. The simple village people don't know about invisibility, so they think it must be witchcraft or ghosts. But their suspicion starts to fall on the strange scientist, especially after he suddenly produces money to pay his rent, just after the clergyman's house was robbed. Finally, Mrs. Hall confronts him. The village constable is called to arrest him. Griffin feels trapped. He gets very, very angry and starts shouting. And then, in a fit of rage, he does something dramatic. He starts taking off his disguise. He throws off his bandages, his glasses, his false nose. And the horrified people in the room find themselves looking at a headless man. Now that we know this story, it is time for us to look deeper. Let's try to understand the important themes and messages that the author, H.G. Wells, wanted to share with us through this story. The first and most important theme is the misuse of a scientific discovery. Griffin's invention was truly great. It could have been used to help mankind, but did he use it for that? No, he used it for selfish reasons, for revenge, to steal things, and to run away from his problems. Instead of helping people, his discovery only created fear and chaos. This shows us a very important lesson. Scientific power without good morals and values is a very dangerous thing. And this brings us to our second key theme, power and responsibility. Becoming invisible gave Griffin a lot of power. He could do anything without being seen, but he did not use this power responsibly. He only used it for bad things. His story is a classic warning that great power must always come with great responsibility. If you have power but you are not responsible, it will only lead to your own downfall. All right, students, now let's move to a very practical section. Let's look at how you can take all these ideas and structure them properly to write good answers in your examinations. So, if you are asked to write a character sketch of Griffin, you can follow this simple 4-step structure. First, in your introduction, you can say that Griffin was a brilliant but lawless scientist. Then, in the body, first talk about his good quality, his intelligence. But then, in the next paragraph, you must give examples of his negative traits, his anger, his selfishness, like setting fire to the house or robbing the shopkeeper. Finally, in your conclusion, you can say that his bad qualities were stronger than his brilliance, and that is why he failed in the end. Now, for questions about the themes of the story, you can begin your answer with a very clear statement like this. For example, the story Footprints Without Feet highlights the theme of misuse of scientific power. But that is not enough. You must then give examples from the text to prove your point. You can write, "This is evident when Griffin sets fire to his landlord's house for revenge." Always support your points with examples. So, as we conclude our lesson today, I want to leave you with this important question to think about. What is the moral duty of a scientist in our modern world? Griffin's story teaches us that just being brilliant is not enough. A scientist must also be a good human being. They have a responsibility to use their knowledge to help the world, not to cause harm. It's a very important lesson for all of us.